Hello, witches. I hope you all had a beautiful Mabon yesterday. We did. We lit a fire. It was magical sitting, listening to the spirits and reading by the fire in the darkness. One of our traditions is that we take down the ribbons that we put on our tree at Beltane, and we take them down at Mabon, and we put up lights instead. I thought I would give you today a recipe for apple pancakes. It's a really simple recipe, and we make it on Mabon for breakfast. You can also make it on Samhain, of course, which is really linked to apples too. Now, apples as a symbol are linked to the underworld. They're often seen as feminine, but not always. They're strongly linked to Avalon, which was also known as the Isle of Apples, and there's a lot of myths about apples being used, or apple boughs being used to cross over into the underworld. I think in the myth of Merlin and Taliesin, I probably pronounced that name wrong by the way, but Taliesin, I believe they carried apple boughs with bells on, which allowed them to cross to the underworld. Of course, Avalon was seen as both the world of the dead and the world of fairies, and there were a lot of crossovers within myth to do with that. If you look at the myths of Alpha and the Lord and Lady of Alpha who ride with not only spirits of the dead but with the fairies as well. Much like the trooping fairies. Fairies, of course, also took and take humans prisoner. And if you cross over into their world, you mustn't eat, for if you do, you will not be able to return to the human world. So yeah, apples are a really important part of the year changing into the autumn, and us seeing the underworld almost coming out in our own world. You know, the death, the ends of cycles. The trees, their leaves die, the flowers die. Essentially, the fruits, you know, they fall from the tree, and they're released. It's the end of their cycle, and if they're left and not picked and eaten, then they're gonna rot away into the ground. But then, of course, they fertilize the ground, allowing new life to begin in the spring. So anyway, I'll move on to the recipe. I will make a downloadable recipe so that you can actually read it and follow it much more easily. But I know certainly for myself, I like to hear a recipe first, to hear the ingredients and the steps, to make sure that it's something that I'm going to have time to do, really. Because for me, I apologise for how I look at the moment. I've had a really busy week. My son's just started nursery school. So anyway, yes, we will move on to the recipe. The ingredients you'll need are 200 grams of self-raising flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, a 1/4 cup of Splenda, which you can omit from the recipe completely if you don't want to use sweetener, or you can exchange it for another dry sweetener, but don't use a wet one like liquid stevia or another liquid, because the moisture from the apples will make it too wet, and it won't cook properly. These pancakes are actually a no added sugar recipe, but they do contain some sugar from the apples. So of course it's just natural sugars, but it is sugar. So self-raising flour, baking powder, Splenda or another sweetener, 4 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 large egg, 300 milliliters of milk, 2 large grated apples or 3 small. I leave the skin on because there's a lot of goodness in the skin, but if you don't want to do that, you can take the skin off. You'll also need either rapeseed or olive oil to cook. I find that with butter it sticks to the pan, so oil is a better idea. if you chill the mixture overnight, it's also more likely to stick to the pan, so you will want to bring it up to room temperature slightly before cooking it. So on to the steps. Step 1, grate the apples and pat them with kitchen roll or tea towel to reduce moisture. You'll want a good brand of kitchen roll because otherwise it will stick to it and become all gross and papery. And equally, you want an old tea towel or one that's easily washable because the apple can leave a bit of a stain and it can get quite mucky. I leave them on paper to dry them further at this point, and I actually put a piece on top as well to just get the moisture out the top. Step 2, Step 2, mix the flour, baking powder and cinnamon together in a large bowl. You can then adjust the cinnamon if you do want to add more, or another spice. In another bowl or cup, beat the egg with the milk. Step 4, make a well in the centre of the dry ingredients and briskly stir in the milk and egg to make a smooth batter. I use a wooden spoon, but of course you can use a whisk if you would rather do that. Because of the thickness of the mixture, I find a wooden spoon is easier. Step 5, pat the apples one last time and then add them to the pancake mix. There is a large ratio of apple to pancake, but it's yummy, and my family have completely backed me up on that one. And that's it. You'll want to fry them on medium heat. I actually use a ladle to get the right amount. You'll want to keep them small and relatively thin, a normal size for American pancakes, because if they're too thick, they do stay really gooey in the middle. I find that in a normal size frying pan, about 3 will fit with some space between them to cook. And then we serve with natural yogurt. You can whip some vanilla essence in if you fancy. And because we have raspberries in the garden, we've had a lot of raspberries this year, so we actually added those as well, and some blackberries. That's it. It's a really simple little recipe. I really hope that you can try it and enjoy it. I'll be back as soon as possible. I hope to start making regular videos again now I have a laptop. And yeah, many blessings and much love. Happy Mabon.